be asking for, and this will happen, the official documentation will be further along in the process. But anytime we have a roundabout, particularly multi-lane in town with pedestrian access, we want to have lighting at the roundabout. So what we would be looking at is a lighting agreement with Macon-Bibb. We would pay for the infrastructure as it's installed. The agreement would be for maintenance of the lighting after the project is built. This is the case for any roundabouts we've built in Macon-Bibb under a federal safety project. And currently today, the city is paying for the energy costs at all 3 traffic lights, for Oglesby, for Anthony, and for Columbus. So it's really ends up kind of being an even trade to some degree. You're taking down 3 traffic lights, you're putting into roundabouts, so there's not a significant change in the maintenance cost. And so that's the only, as far as a project and it being put in, there's no local match. As far as ongoing maintenance, there would be that request for an agreement from the city to put in, or excuse me, to maintain and pay for the energy cost of the lighting.
Okay, so we would pay for the operation once it's installed.
That's correct.
Any maintenance is required. And I agree, this should have been a public safety item, Commissioner.
Whatever. And that's standard on the lighting. So you confirm what we're used to, Tyler.
Okay.
We got to teach people how to drive in roundabouts, though.
Yeah.
That's an ongoing challenge.
Absolutely.
Any other questions for Tyler or Nigel?
I do have the two other audits that I wanted to mention.
Okay.
Chairman, if I can just, but if
Yes,
there's
sir.
Other questions about this one, I can go ahead and take those now. We can address those.
Any questions about this one before he proceeds? Okay, go ahead, Tyler. Thank you.
Okay, so the second one I'm going to talk about is at Pinona, and this audit was actually done the same day. I'm going to switch back to Google Earth. So this was done the same day, and went from the limits of the Mercer audit, went from along Pinona, went from Mercer, or just north of Mercer, all the way to Eisenhower. So it was this section, of roadway here. And so, similar characteristics in terms of concentration of crashes at major intersections. We did have a pedestrian fatality at Carroll Street within the time frame that was studied. What we looked at here, you've got 2 major intersections on either end, and then you've got one in the middle at Anthony. And so but there are some other considerations we looked at too, because right now you have from Eisenhower to Anthony, you have what we call a center turn lane. So you've got this section in the middle where you can turn from in either direction. It provides you a left turn lane opportunity. You can get out of traffic and make your turn. North of Anthony, that goes away. So you have just 4 lanes, 2 in each direction with no turn lane, which makes it really challenging. I'm sure we've all driven through these sections where you want to turn left, but the people behind you do not. And so you're hoping they see you with your turn signal. So those aren't really ideal as long-term options. And so what we had looked at here was, is there a way to accommodate that while still maintaining good traffic flow? And so I'm going to switch now to our recommendations. And so I'm going to start at Eisenhower. What we're looking at, well, let me start actually a few pages over. So I've got separate pages here for this one also. I'll start at Anthony. What we're looking at doing on the north side of Anthony is what we call a road diet. That's really a non-technical term for what it is. It's just reducing the number of lanes, usually to create an opportunity for a turn lane or for multimodal type options. So we would use the existing pavement surface and we would restripe it essentially from 4 lanes to 3. So you, instead of 2 lanes in each direction, you'd have 1 lane in each direction, but you would also give a center turn lane between Anthony and Mercer. So I'm going to kind of pan to the next page here, where you can see that that would continue all the way to the signal at Mercer. You've got an existing pedestrian crosswalk here at Sirius Academy that would remain. It would actually be a better scenario for that also, because you would just have a single lane versus multi-lane approaches. In addition to that, we would be doing traffic signal upgrades. I'm going to go back to the first sheet, which is at Eisenhower. We would be doing a traffic signal upgrade at Eisenhower, and a few changes associated with that. So today, what you have is at that light, you have, of course, 2 lanes in each direction on Pinona, and then 3 lanes in each direction on Eisenhower. You've also got 2 left turn lanes for every approach. So there's a lot of asphalt out there at the intersection, particularly in looking at pedestrian situations. There's a lot of crossing distance. In the analysis that was done here, we determined that the dual left, the two left turn lane scenario is not required. It's not necessary any longer. It's usually put in for capacity, and it's not necessary that those remain. And so the recommendation is, as part of the road diet and the lane changes to the north, we would also be striping out that sort of outside turn lane and keeping just a single left turn lane in each direction. It also allows us with our traffic signal heads to be a little more flexible in those operations. So today you cannot turn unless you have a green arrow. That would probably remain the case in heavy volume hours, but during lower volume hours, maybe overnight, that type of thing, you would probably see the option of turning left on a flashing yellow arrow, which you see at other intersections that have been newly upgraded. So it would allow us to be a little more efficient in some operations, depending on the time of day. We would also be looking at Anthony at also a traffic signal upgrade with similar type changes, we'd be changing out the existing traffic light heads, signal heads, with flashing yellow arrows, again, to be more nimble in some of our operations. Of course, north of Anthony's, where we'll be dropping down from 5 lanes, including that turn lane, down to 3 lanes. And then we would also be doing the same thing or something similar at Mercer, in terms of just replacing traffic signal heads, making sure everything is up to current standard pedestrian heads, vehicle heads, everything else, to make sure that it's, we've got the best equipment out there. One other thing, or a couple of other things that we would be looking at before I get into kind of the timetable on this, there's some gaps in sidewalk along Pinona. I'm sure y'all are aware of that, and those are identified in these sort of yellow lines here on the side. Gaps in sidewalk, as well as pedestrian crossings, is something that we would be looking at partnering with the city. So we could be looking at maybe like some GDOT state funded projects known as quick response, and you've seen some quick response projects in Macon-Bibb throughout the last several years. They're low budget projects, less than $200,000. So connecting sidewalk gaps, putting in pedestrian refuge islands and flashing signals is probably something we'd be looking at for either local funding or quick response state funding. And that's, those are conversations we can look at as we go on this particular project. That doesn't have to be decided today or immediately. It's just that's the direction GDOT is looking at heading for those type of improvements. They're smaller improvements along the corridor, less expensive, and that's the way we would look to tackle those. One last thing is, well, let me go through a little bit of the time frame here. GDOT is resurfacing Pinona in fiscal year 21. Probably about this time next year is when we would see that work beginning. We usually try to do that in spring and summer. So it would be a spring calendar year 21 when we would look at resurfacing this. And what we plan to do, the best time for us to restripe and change things is when we resurface, because we're already repaving the road, we're already redoing the striping. It's much more cost effective than for us to tackle changes to striping with a resurfacing project. So when this is resurfaced is when we would plan to change the lane configuration, reduce the number of lanes down from 4 to 3 in that section, and make those improvements. We would also, the signal upgrades, we would work towards getting those scheduled, hopefully about the same time, but there may be some lag there because that would be separate funding that GDOT would be looking at with our own maintenance contracts. So those would be GDOT funded traffic light upgrades. The last thing that we would be looking at as a long-term solution would be replacing the signal at Anthony with a roundabout. Again, for traffic or for safety purposes, it was identified that this would be a good improvement long-term for that location. Now, this project does not yet have the federal funding commitment, so that's something it's earlier even than the project we just discussed. So this is certainly longer term, but it's something that GDOT plans to continue advancing and hopefully get funding for here soon. So again, all of this to address traffic or to address safety concerns along the corridor, both pedestrian and vehicular, crash history, and all of these improvements will do that.
Okay.
Questions on this particular corridor?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to say, if there's questions, we'll be glad to discuss those.
I've got kind of a general question that could pertain to this for you and or Nigel. When you have a designated left-hand turn lane and the traffic light has a turn signal for that, what's the time registration as far as a vehicle coming into that lane? How long is that vehicle supposed to be in that lane before it registers or picks up on that vehicle in that lane, whereby it will give the left-hand turn signal? Because if you're not there long enough, then it doesn't pick up your vehicle, and then you just sit there through another whole rotation. What's standard for that, as far as it would pick you up if you've been there 10 seconds, or what's standard?
So it picks you up immediately when you have crossed over the detector device, and that varies. Most of the time it's in the ground, and it's a magnetic loop sensor. And so once you have crossed over that, it detects your vehicle. Now, it doesn't mean that it changes automatically by any means, because usually, particularly traffic lights along Pinona, along Eisenhower, along Mercer, are timed in a system. There's a number of traffic lights that are close enough together that because you've got people traveling all the way down Eisenhower through all of those signals, they need to be timed and coordinated. Otherwise, you stop at every red light as you go. And so if you're let's say you're in that turn lane, you enter the turn lane, it's going to detect you immediately.
Okay.
Now, there are malfunctions sometimes with loops that we discover, and those are separate maintenance issues, but it detects you immediately. And what happens is when the time comes for, let's say the green light is on Eisenhower and you're in the turn lane on Pinona, then you'll wait until the full cycle is complete for Eisenhower, and then if it has detected a left turning vehicle, then you'll be next in line, basically. Does that answer your question?
Well, somewhat. It's so I understand it detects you as soon as you cross that sensor in the ground, but there must be a time frame whereby your vehicle has to be in that lane, or it seems my sense is you have to be there a certain length of time before it will adjust and give you the left-hand turn signal. Otherwise, it goes on in the function of the light.
Well, Commissioner, it also depends on what type of left turn signal it is, whether it's a protective permissive or protective only. If it's protective only, then you got to wait until it cycles the entire intersection before it comes back around and give you a light for that left turn. If it's a protective permissive, then you can turn on that green ball or that flashing yellow arrow. So there's no need to come back and resurface that left turn, because you can turn if you got the right of way, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, so with the new lights where you got the flashing yellow, I can see how that would work. But the older lights, and I know you're going to put new lights in these locations where you're in some, in the old ones, you don't have that flashing yellow light. Like I know at Forsyth and Tucker Road, for instance, you have that going north. You have that yellow flashing light that allows you to turn, proceed with caution, and still make a turn. So that's a newer light, and that's a state road, of course, Forsyth.
Right, and if you, so without the flashing yellow arrows, if you have just a green light and you're in a left turn lane, then the same rule still applies of, you know, yielding no oncoming traffic, but a left turn is permissive. If you have a green arrow or an arrow at all, and you're in that left turn lane, then those arrows are your indicators. So if you get a green arrow, obviously you've got your, you make your movement. If the green arrow is gone and you're only left with the traditional green ball, as we call it, then you would treat it like the flashing yellow arrow, where you would turn left.
Right.
You get a gap in oncoming traffic. So,
Okay. Anybody are you through with that portion, Tyler? Not trying to rush you.
No, sir. Yes, we're done with this particular segment here.
Any questions for Tyler on this segment? Okay.
All right. So the last one I have is at Eisenhower. This study was done actually a little longer ago when it was actually a lot larger. I'm going to go back to Google and kind of show you the limits here. Our limits went from Bloomfield all the way to C Street. So I think it was like I forget the number of miles. I don't want to misspeak, but it was a very lengthy corridor to walk. I can tell you that during the day when we did the audit. This was a few years ago that this was done. As Nigel mentioned when we first got on the call, there had been some changes along Eisenhower that were the direct result of the road safety audit. So I'll point out a few of those. We most recently have put in what we call a pedestrian hybrid beacon, pedestrian activated signal, basically at C Street, along with some, you can't really see, it's not totally complete, but you can see most of it here, as well as an island in the middle that redirects your vehicles from the side street to make a right turn. So you've eliminated that conflict crossing, and they're also provided pedestrian accommodations. Additionally, we have done some traffic signal upgrades and some changes there at Oglesby and at Macon Tech Drive. And I'll say the Oglesby, to me, was one of the biggest success stories, because there, and you can see it in the sketch here, there were no crosswalks or pedestrian accommodations, yet you had bus stops at the intersection. So today, there's pedestrian accommodations that allow for better access there. We've also got, as part of this fiscal year's funding, we have committed Bloomfield, Heron Street, and Key Street for upgrades to the traffic lights there also. And that's not something we'll probably see for maybe another couple months, but that will be funded in terms of GDOT's fiscal year before the end of June. We also, within the last couple of years, we installed a reduced conflict U-turn at the back entrance of Academy. This is again identified as an improvement as part of the road safety audit to reduce or restrict those exits to right turns only. So what we would be looking at, I'm going to switch to the recommendations sheet here. And this is a little bit, this has been updated slightly from what you probably have received, but most all of it is the same. So I'll just point out the things that are different here in a minute. We're also looking at this corridor for a road diet. As you know, it's 6 lanes from basically from Key Street or a little east of Key Street all the way to 75. And really, if you, I know all of you have been out there, it's not really necessary. It's a lot of asphalt and it's not, 6 lanes are not needed to accommodate the operations for vehicles. So we will be looking at reducing this from 6 lanes to 4 lanes. keeping in, the median as it is. Likely doing this again with a resurfacing project. Now, GDOT does not have resurfacing of Eisenhower on the table right now. It's something that we'll be funding in the future, but it's not anything within the next 2 or 3 years that we have a project ready to go for. So we're looking at a longer term in terms of the road diet on this location. We would also be proposing R-cuts or reduced conflict U-turns. R-cuts, just the acronym GDOT loves to give to it, for the AT&T driveway, for the old Westgate Mall entrance, and then for Levita and Pine Street, close to the interstate. At those 3 locations, those are existing full median openings. We would be changing that to where your side street traffic would have to turn right. If you're on Eisenhower, you could continue to turn left or right or go through. If you're on the side streets, you'd have to turn right and U-turn at the next available location. We would also be looking at converting this, the Pet Boys entrance here, just closing that median entirely. It's a kind of a partial median opening today as far as their exiting traffic, so we'll be closing that median off. And then we would additionally be looking at Anthony Terrace, leaving the traffic light, but again, only allowing the side streets to turn right. So your left turns from Eisenhower could continue to turn left, it would be signalized, but your side street traffic would go right only. So you would reduce those conflicts that occur there. We also would be looking at a roundabout at I-75 at the southbound ramp. Currently, that's a traffic light, so we'd be replacing the traffic light with a roundabout, maintaining the operations through there. This is a location that would be that we'd be considering for federal safety funding. It's obviously going to be a little costlier endeavor because of the type of intersection it is. So that's on point for us for federal safety dollars. And then the last sort of major improvement we would be looking at is at the northbound ramp. Currently, there's no traffic light there today. And what we would be looking at here is a change in operations. You'll continue to make the same turns you do today, but we would change the flow of Eisenhower where as you're approaching it, it drops to, you have a lane drop and you only have one lane that continues through the intersection in each direction. So for example, if you're coming from the west, if you're in the outside lane, you would be making, or you'd be forced to make a right turn onto the ramp. If you're on the inside lane, you continue through the intersection. If you're coming from the C Street direction, if you're in the outside lane, you would continue through. If you're in the inside lane, you would be directed to turn left. What that allows us to do is, if you're coming from the ramp, making a left turn, currently you're having to look for 4 lanes of traffic plus turn lanes. This would allow you to make your left turn, considering the traffic coming from your west and considering the turn lane, but you're not in conflict with this through lane coming from the C Street direction. So you would turn left and get in, and you would basically be creating that new lane as you enter. So there would, the conflict here would be removed that you have today for that through traffic. So this, all of this can be done within the pavement. It's something we'd be looking at for either like a GDOT funded quick response or something even maybe our own in-house crews, maintenance crews can do. They can do concrete striping, that kind of thing, particularly in smaller type project settings. So this may be something that we try to tackle with those forces.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Tillman.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Tyler, excuse me. Tyler, we have a group that have formed a BID. We have a committee from exit 3 on Eisenhower to Oglesby place right there at the farmers market. GDOT has allowed us to install 27 new traffic, correction, 27 or 28 new lighting fixtures. So we would love to have you meet with our group, which is chaired by Jamie Arnold. One of the things that some have been interested in is right below the Sam's Club, and it's right at Serena Wholesale. If you would take a note and make that a entryway out of the same way it was done at the old Kroger flea market across from the mall. Looking for that exact same exit entryway off of Eisenhower Parkway, which would allow people to get in and out as opposed to going back up to Log Cabin and then making a right and then going out, because it's so bad on the weekend that Sam's has a police officer there just so their folks could get out. So with that would eliminate in that section where I'll just use Serena Wholesale, is people got two options. They got to go back out up to Sam's and make a right to get on Eisenhower, or they have to go all the way down to S&S and go and get out at Bloomfield, where you're talking about adding the roundabout. So because you've got those two grocery stores there, Serena and whatever the other one is, we really would like for you all to consider, because we have funding over there as well, to consider an exit way out of that particular Serena Wholesale way. This way, it alleviates traffic having to go back either direction. And if you're familiar with the area, and Nigel should be, no matter which way you go, you still got to go back up to the Sam's Way where there's a lot of traffic, and we got to go back to a Bloomfield Drive. But if you allow traffic, and I don't know, what do you call it? It's the same one, like I say, directly across from the mall, right there at the old flea market, whatever that's right called. Right. We're looking just to do the same thing. We think that will help and alleviate some stuff. And our group, because I'm not speaking just for them, but I think we may have raised a little bit under $1 million with that BID, and would love to help you. And it's interesting that you say that you would be doing a roundabout at Oglesby, because it's not as congested as it is coming back up toward the other way. When you leave Sam's, that area. And then the final thing is, can you confirm, Nigel or Tyler, that we often say that Eisenhower Parkway is the most second traveled street next to Gray Highway. Has a count been, is that still the case, or what do you see? Thank you.
I'm not certain about Eisenhower now. I would have to look at GDOT traffic counts to give you a definite, but Pinehone Avenue is ranked up there as well. But what I'll do, I'll look at the traffic counts that GDOT has on their website, and I'll get you an answer on the amount of traffic Eisenhower was carrying versus some of the other state arterials.
Well, Nigel, that would be interesting, because there are not a lot of big trucks that's traveling on Pinehone versus coming out of Columbus and going into Columbus on Eisenhower. You've got all of that Lozella traffic. You've got all of that traffic coming from Columbus. So, I think that's important when we're making these decisions versus, doing a roundabout at Oglesby where you know, there's basically, I can understand that because at some points there's not as much traffic. Just like, you know, the folks were screaming about, you know, the Zebulon Road, and when that project went up over there, you know, it's not as much traffic. It's just certain parts of the day at Oglesby. So we do need to look at that, because I do think that that traffic count will say maybe we do need that cut in, maybe in within that area somewhere, because you even had a church there. They've moved, but other things are steady coming into that area because of the improvement. And if you look at the beautification now of Eisenhower, it has improved so much over the last couple of years that a lot more folks are moving in. We've gained the Cookout, we've gained the Wendy's and the Chick-fil-A and some other things that, you know, we're excited about. We still have a long way to go, and I think GDOT could help if people can get in and out. Thank you.
So thank you very much. We'll reach out to Jamie Arnold. We've worked with her before, and so we'll reach out to her on the. I mean, it sounds like a very logical option. I think we can work through those details with her. I would like to just a point of clarification. We aren't planning at this time to install a roundabout at Oglesby.
Okay.
So Oglesby, we just completed the pedestrian upgrades to that signal, where we added crosswalks, added pedestrian signals. So at this point, that's all GDOT's planning to do at Oglesby. The only roundabout on Eisenhower we're looking at right now is at the southbound ramp. So just wanted to make sure I didn't know, didn't want to make sure I had not misspoken there.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch back to the layout real quick and point out one other thing, or a couple other things. So we would be looking at a long-term roundabout at the southbound ramp. We'd also be Key Street traffic lights are going to be upgraded as part of this fiscal year's funding. But again, we would be looking at Pinona, at the traffic lights being upgraded there. Now, I mentioned earlier, we've got a Pinona project that we're looking at also. So there will be coordination, obviously, between these two, since that's sort of the crossroads. My expectation would be that GDOT will take care of the traffic light upgrade, even if all of the rest of the road diet and changes have not been made. We'll make sure it accommodates the future plan, but we won't necessarily wait to do the traffic light upgrades until everything else is complete. I did want to mention also, we've got some sidewalk connectivity issues here, particularly from the Westgate area over towards Key Street. And so that's, again, something that we're going to be looking at, probably at some type of partnership with local funding and perhaps GDOT state funded quick response. Those are possibilities that we can explore. Any questions about this particular corridor?
Tyler, what about the bike lane you got there?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd forgotten to bring that up. So if we restripe this from 6 lanes to 4 lanes, obviously we have extra pavement out there that doesn't really have any, we don't have anything to do with it. So what we'd be doing is converting that to a separated bike lane. You'd have a buffer and then bike lanes in each direction. You'd have, obviously, at your intersections, you'd have points of crossing where cyclists can continue, make turns and so forth. But that would be a big win as well, because obviously we identified a lot of pedestrians and cyclist needs along all of these corridors, but this is really an opportunity for us to repurpose the asphalt and provide for some additional mobility for cyclists in a much more protected environment than they have today.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Lucas.
Thank you. I just want to express appreciation on behalf of the Pedestrian Safety Review Board for all of this work, because many of the items have been generated from discussion in Pedestrian Safety Review Board, and Nigel serves on that and has done a tremendous job, and we want to thank GDOT. I also want to request that we have that update given to Public Safety Committee, where this probably should have been, Madam Chair. But I also want us to get this information to our legislative delegation, and if they had any part, you remember we passed a resolution asking them to assist us with these kinds of things, sidewalks, the lighting, all of these roundabouts and all of that. And we certainly want GDOT and Nigel to get this information to them, to let them know what improvements are being made in areas that they also represent, so that they can continue helping us to push for improvements. Because we've still got a lot of work to do, but we appreciate GDOT for all of this. This is a tremendous amount of work, and we are appreciative, and we need to use our SPLOST pedestrian safety monies that we designated in the SPLOST for filling in the gaps. Where GDOT doesn't fund it, we need to use that money to fund the sidewalks, the lighting, whatever it is that we need to do. That's why we put it in the SPLOST. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Commissioner Lucas. And we'll be sure to, we can definitely provide those updates to the legislative delegation. And I appreciate Macon-Bibb's interest and support. In every one of these audits we've done, Nigel and his team have been present and have been involved in assisting us with information and that type of thing. And we also, I did want to point out, we had a road safety audit done also on Emory Highway that GDOT had sponsored. And so we hope to have some updates on that, in the future. That's still being processed in terms of improvement possibilities. And the city had led an initiative along Gray Highway as well.
Right.
And I think probably need to circle back with Nigel and his team, and I know Brad Belo was involved with that, and just try to get a consensus on what we need to look at for future improvements. But we consider this a big win where we can make a lot of efforts. So, as I mentioned before, some of this is going to be different steps at a time. It may not be one, unlike Mercer, where it's one big project. The rest of these are going to take some time to implement with many steps, but I think we can get there.
Great.
Anything you want to add, Nigel?
No, I think Tyler said a mouthful.
He did. So Tyler, to kind of recap, project number 1 has been fully funded by it's a federal safety project that are fully funded and committed to. The other 2 are still in the development process. And you gave us a lot of good information, and we appreciate you and GDOT, and we appreciate Nigel, as it's been stated, and the Public Safety Review Committee, and we appreciate you including the commissioners that cover these areas so they can have some input from citizenry and various groups. So we appreciate the inclusion.
All right, sure. Thank you very much.
Any further questions for Tyler while we have him here? Thank you so much. Those are some great safety improvements, and we look forward to seeing them being in place.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on to number 5, which is regulations regarding Lake Tobesofkee, a resolution to establish new regulations governing the Lake Tobesofkee recreation area related to camping fees, parking fees, and facility rental fees. This was sponsored by Commissioner Joe Allen. So Joe, I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak, say whatever you want.
Motion to go to lunch.
You can go have lunch.
I'll meet the Bears Den, Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion for a time limit.
I'll give you a good time limit. Okay.
All right, Commissioner Allen, tell us.
Thank you. Several months ago, we had a vote to bring the fees down until we could get most of the work done at Lake Tobesofkee. I asked that we did $5 a carload, and some other fees were brought down. We also asked that as soon as the work started out there, hopefully before Memorial Day, which is already passed, work is still being done, that we take the fees back up. We lost $30,000 in our final for last year by bringing the fees down. We had a lot of people come to the lake. What I'm asking is either Mr. Ross has the resolution with the fee structure, or Dr. Moffitt or Ms. Moore, if they could give the fee structure to us and let us know exactly. They've been moved up to right below state levels. So everyone will be going this year, will at a certain date and time to be announced by Dr. Moffitt in the very near future, that the new fees will go into place.
Is anything, Michael, you want to add to that as far as what the fees are? I guess that's with an exhibit. I don't have that in front of me, what they're going.
Sure.
It's in the legislation.
Right, it's the body of the legislation, and the way this resolution is drafted is that it takes effect immediately upon approval. So if you want to change the effective date to start the fees at another time, we can make that amendment. But the first is, so right now it's a flat fee of for cars, $5 a car, but there were different fees that were spelled out for buses or passenger vans, different types of vehicles. This changes it to a per person fee, no matter what type of vehicle they're coming in by, it's $3 a person. The launch fee stays at $5 a vessel. Several of the pavilions were increased. So the enclosed pavilion at Claystone will go from $300 to $350 a day. The open pavilions stay at $5 a day. Sandy Beach, the upper pavilion goes from $175 to $225 per day. And the lower pavilion goes from $150 to $200 per day. And then at Arrowhead, there's a pavilion there. It's currently $150, goes up to $200 per day. This also keeps the summer parking pass for people that purchase the season pass for the water park at $30. So if you have a water park summer pass, then you can buy a season pass to park at the water park for $30. And then this increases several of the camping fees as well. So the waterfront sites with water and electric go from $25 to $30 per night. The waterfront sites with water, electric, and sewer go from $25 to $35 per night. The pull-through and back-in sites with sewer service go from $25 to $30 per night. The pull-through and back-in sites with water and electric service go from $22 to $27 per night. The tent sites with water and electric service go from $18 to $23, and the primitive camping sites go from $15 to $20. And then one other provision that this adds in is that if someone wants to make a reservation for a camping site or a pavilion, they have to pay a deposit of 50% of the total renting price at the time they make the reservation. And that goes towards the cost of the reservation, but is otherwise non-refundable except by the mayor or the commission.
This was approved that we were going to go up on these fees back several months ago, Michael. Do you know when we did this?
I don't know off the top of my head when we changed them. I think it was a year or two ago that we lowered.
It's been within the last year. Dr. Moffitt would, and I see some of y'all a little shaking your head a little bit, but guys, look, this was done knowing that we was going to do all this work, taking the fees down to $5 a carload. You know, that park out there makes money for Macon-Bibb County. And what we have to do is utilize something that's working for us. We've not gone up on those fees in quite a while. And now it's time that, and like I said, we said it would have to go back up. And Dr. Moffitt and Ms. Moore went below state level. I saw Dr. Moffitt online. I think he could address that.
Yes, sir. Again, this is the recommendation to get us back in par. Since we made the change 2 years ago, we have seen a decrease in revenues compared in previous years. Again, this is just putting us back at the level we were about 2 years ago.
So Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask Commissioner Allen, these, well, I think Dr. Moffitt just said that, but these were similar fees that we had a couple of years ago, right? We're just going back to those. Is that pretty much what we're doing?
in my opinion, we're going up on our fees compared to what we had several years ago. This is right below state level. We didn't go to state level. We went right below state level.
But it's similar to what we had a couple of years ago.
It's pretty close, yes, but it's not to a level to exceed the state, but it's not at the level of where we were.
Let's let Michael address that. Michael?
Yeah. So I've got the resolution here where they were changed before. This was adopted in June of 2018. And the admission fees were $3 per person. It was changed to a variable rate depending on the type of vehicle that the people were in. But that's going back to what it was before. The boat launch fee 2 years ago, you raised it from $4 a boat to $5 a boat. That's staying the same at $5. And then the pavilion rental fees are all going up a little bit from where they were 2 years ago. So for example, the enclosed pavilion at Claystone, it was $200 in 2018. You raised it to $300. This resolution would now raise it to $350 per day. So the pavilion fees do go up a little bit, but the admission and parking fees and the boat launch fees all stay the same. And then the camping fees were not affected by the 2018 resolution at all. And so the camping fees are going up a little bit for, they just weren't addressed 2 years ago when you considered this.
Okay.
Given the fact that they're all seem very reasonable to me, and some of them are the same, some of them are slightly more, but given the fact that they're very reasonable and they're below state levels, I would be in favor of it. Any other comments?
Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I am not in favor of us increasing stuff right now. Folks just got their property tax estimates or bills or what. I don't know about anybody else, but I got mine. Something indicating what it would probably be. But I would like for us to get the work done out there and then take a look at this again. I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, but right now I am, because I don't, with the pandemic, with all the other things, with folks being off work, having to almost beg people for some unemployment, and we don't know how many, there are lots and lots of folks who are in those situations. Do we want to discourage use now? And any perceived increase is going to be, in the eyes of the public, increases, and you're adding to this and you're taxing me here, you're taxing me there. Do we want to do this at this time? I am not in favor of changing this right now. It will be necessary. I don't think there's a problem later on, but I don't want to do it right now. And especially with the unemployment situation and also with the property tax bills going out. So I would not be in favor of voting for that right now. I just would like for us to look at it. I need to look at the actual increases myself a second time, and then I would be prepared to discuss and possibly vote for it, but I'm not at this time. And you'll have to excuse me, I do have a doctor's appointment, but I will be back just as soon as I am finished.
Okay, well, be well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I was hearing, the majority of the bigger fees are going to be for the pavilion rental. The other things that are going to remain almost constant or just slightly above, like the boat launching fee, I think didn't change. The admission per card didn't change or might have gone up $1 or so. So the biggest things I heard, and the camping fees were just slightly $5 or so. So the biggest thing I heard were pavilions, if I'm not mistaken. And right now, I'm not so sure that people are going to be renting pavilions with the virus still hanging on around us, and people really don't want people to gather that much. So pavilions may not be being booked very much to start with, maybe not till the end of the summer anyway. But I'm in favor of changing the fees now, because I think we need to find some way to bring income back to at least something we're doing with our city. And that would be a good way to do it. And besides, like I said, the smaller fees are not going to really change that much. It's just the pavilion fees. And I kind of doubt a lot of pavilions going to be rented right now.
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We got a motion to approve and a second.
So is the work complete?
It's being done now. Some of the work's being done now. It's gonna take a while to do it all.
So we're gonna go up on the fees immediately before the work is completed, and the reason we went down on the fees is to honor people for the work that was being completed and the partial service they would get. I don't understand the urgency of raising the fees today based on those points.
Based on the points of the money we lost last year, we have to. I mean, the type funding we get at Lake Tobosoffke is not just tax dollars. Hotel motels tax dollars is what we basically get out there and what people spend to use out there.
Any further comments?
Well, just one further comment to address that. I think the pavilions are going to be the ones that may not be rented that much, but the other facilities we have are operational. I mean, I know we're upgrading some restrooms in I think it was the guards gates. Is that right, Commissioner?
The gatehouses.
Things like that, but just the regular use, people going swimming and boating, I think those fees are staying pretty much the same and close to it. So, I know that construction is underway to finish some of those other things, and that'll be done. But we want to do this now at the beginning of the summer so they can get used to it, because the traffic is going to pick up out there.
Good time to be outdoors.
Yes.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Is that Commissioner Watkins?
Yeah, I'm not on the committee, I believe.
Bivens.
Who was the opposing?
Bivens.
Bivens, I'm sorry. Commissioner Burt Bivens III voted against, so passes 4-1. And that completes that. Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Number 6 is real estate broker services. A resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional service agreement with Coldwell Banker Commercial, Eberhard and Berry, Inc., Stephanie Folsom, to provide real estate broker services for the disposal of county-owned surplus property. Before I turn that over to you, Mr. Mayor, for some comments, just from my standpoint, I'm with Coldwell Banker Access Realty. That's our new name. We were Coldwell Banker Sheridan Solomon Kernigan. My office is a residential real estate office. I sell houses and land. Just to make sure everyone understands there's no conflict here. This is a totally separate office that deals in commercial real estate only. I certainly know Stephanie Folsom. I have never dealt with her on a real estate transaction, but she does have an excellent reputation. I can tell you that. So with that, I'm going to ask Mayor Rickard if he wants to say anything about this.
I really think that either the county attorney or the county manager may have better information. My recollection is that several months, if not years ago, we adopted the policy that allowed you to hire a commercial real estate broker to help get rid of surplus property. And now what we've done is more recently gone through an RFP, RFQ process, and the selection panel recommends Stephanie Folsom, who was one of, I think, 2 that submitted the application.
Questions on the RFP process here. How was that managed?
Yes, sir. If you recall, before County Attorney Judge Drake left, he presented this saying that the state had created a rule that allowed governments to contract with a realtor to sell surplus property and even represent us on the purchase and buying of property. So before he left, we put an RFP together. We put it out. We had 2 respondents, one from Atlanta and then the one local from Caldwell through Ms. Folsom. We went,
So
the reason why
how
it's
did
taking so
y'all
long because
send
we
it to
have
two?
talked.
Wait a minute.
Like,
What do you mean?
how many did we send it
No,
to?
we had it on our website.
How many did we? I mean, two just seems really low for real estate agents. Like thousands of those guys.
Well, again, this was something new in the process as far as how we would use the real estate agent. But we put it on our website. When you say send it to, at that time, Chauncey was here. So I have to go to procurement and find out where we advertised. But I do know it was on our website. So it was out for the public. So I would have to get the exact specifics of when you say who do we send it to, exactly what organizations or what associations that he did forward it to. So I have to get that information. But we did have two respondents.
Yeah, I'm curious if anything went out. I mean, I know Mallory serves as a agent, realtor. I do too on a brokerage. I hadn't seen anything about this or heard any comments from the industry on this, and that just strikes me as a little strange.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yes, sir, Mr. Gerby.
According to and I'll defer to Michelle on this because she drafted the resolution, I believe. But according to the resolution, the RFPs were published on August 12th, 2019 and posted on the Macon-Bibb County procurement page and to the Georgia Procurement Registry. Michelle, do you have any other information about that? You're muted.
I mean, the other associations of realtors here. That's
Michelle,
I'm getting there. Yes, yes. So the information that I had was the same that you're mentioning. It was just what was provided in the procurement packet itself. And I think, one of the issues was that this was something brand new. We moved on it fairly close after it was passed state level. I don't have any additional information. I'm looking through the packet. I don't have any additional information.
So I'm curious about the scope of services. What are we agreeing to when we say real estate services?
Basically, the scope of services is modeled. I took it from the code itself. So the code itself breaks out how the broker works in this situation. The county manager, city manager will provide a list of surplus property. It's a pretty comprehensive list. It has several hundred properties on it. Some are pretty small, some are larger in scale. Dr. Moffitt and I have met with Stephanie to discuss kind of how to tackle that list, but it's basically looking at the properties that are maybe larger in scale. She will have to comply completely with the statute on how to go about the services. So in talking with her to kind of achieve this, she will sometimes use, she'll group parcels together and put them on auction.
So I'm clear then, we're not talking about one property on a single basis. We're talking about some type of contract for perpetuity, as whatever is surplus now and what may ever occur in the future, she would have exclusive rights.
It is definitely an evolving list. Properties will come off of it. Properties will be added to it. It is the list of surplus property as it exists at the time of this contract. It is.
But I don't think that the word exclusive applies here. And this is really just another avenue for us to be proactive to market property. If the current way we do it, we can either transfer it to the UDA, or we could go through the county attorney's office and have the closed bid process. So again, this is just another avenue. But when the state changed the code, they allow for us to contract with a realtor to represent us in real estate matters of buying and selling property. And this would be our process in contracting with Ms. Folsom to be that realtor. What I've done
there's
is
the property on the wholesale, what do you call the list again? Surplus list?
Yes.
And Ms. Folsom has engaged it whatever the engagement procedures may be, and it sells, she receives a commission, correct?
Right.
All right.
Correct.
That's
but
okay.
there
So she has
is still
exclusive rights to list those properties.
It's not exclusive,
It's not
as Dr.
exclusive.
Moffat was pointing
Okay.
out.
What type of
There will always be an approval process in there. She can't sell something that does not go through the approval process. So commission would still have to approve the sale of the property. That authority is not taken away.
Okay, but she's okay.
And it's not exclusive. There are other ways that property can still be sold, as Dr. Moffat was pointing out correctly. This is just an additional means of accomplishing the movement of property.
Okay.
Sitting there.
And I assume we got a really good deal on the commission rate, being that it's a bulk deal. What is the commission?
The commission rate is 10% of the sale.
And is that the industry average?
That was my understanding of it. That was actually something that she negotiated with Chauncey before he left. That was the term that I was provided. And it's my understanding that that is kind of an industry standard for commercial property.
And if that is the average, we got no discount on the average.
I can't really speak to that part of it.
Let me interject here. I think where Commissioner Watkins is coming from, number one, we can't talk about commission in the real estate industry because it gets put in called collusion. So that would be a fee that would be very common in this area. So I'll put it that way. And I think what he wants to know is typically when we sign a real estate contract, it's called an exclusive right to sell listing agreement. But it sounds like what you've done is given her a list of properties that these are properties we're interested in selling. So perhaps the procedure is, okay, I've got a buyer for building A, and then perhaps you draw up an exclusive right to sell listing agreement at that point in time where she has engaged a prospective buyer. I don't know. You'll have to tell me on that one, but typically that's what we deal with. Keith and Michelle and Duke, we deal with an exclusive right to sell listing agreement for a specific property. So it sounds to me like you're probably, it's almost like what we call a pocket listing, Virgil, in that, okay, I've got this list of properties that I can sell. And if I bring a ready, willing, and able buyer to Macon-Bibb County, then I'm going to draw up an exclusive right to sell listing agreement and engage in and move toward closing. Is that the way it's set up?
Oh, Mr. Chair, can I add something real quick?
1 second, let him answer this question first.
The mayor, I think, wanted to answer.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is for both buying and selling property. Right. Oftentimes, just for example, and let me just use an example. We have looked in the past for a location, for example, a fire station. And we really have been a little bit hampered by trying to negotiate with the property owner, find the property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this would give us a real estate agent that would work for us when we said we're looking to acquire property, buy property, and that's the one when we purchase property, that the 10% commission would apply. So commission would obviously be involved in what property we're trying to acquire, and then you just use the agent to help acquire it, and you pay the commission, which is kind of a going rate anyway, but at least they'd be able to negotiate for you. They also, however, would assist us with the disposition of surplus property. So you got two buying and selling. And where you're trying to sell property, the process has to comply with state law, which is either sealed bid anytime you get rid of public property. But what the agent is supposed to do for us is actively market the disposition of surplus property, comply with all federal, state, and local laws, create a website which posts a request for sealed bids, questions by interested parties, responses to questions submitted by arranging a time for people to go look at the surplus property, and then receive and present sealed bids to us to look at. And then whoever is the high bidder would get it. And then for that, she gets a commission of $500 or 1% of the fair market price. So if you had a list of blighted properties, for example, that you've acquired and now trying to sell the blighted property, you can't use the SPLOST funds, because SPLOST you have to maintain possession. But if you use general fund monies to acquire some of these blighted structures and then try to sell the lot, could be a residential lot, could be a commercial lot, whatever we're doing as far as these blighted structures are concerned, you go through this sealed bid process, is my understanding. So I'll turn it back over to the county attorney for
Let
any
me make one just minor clarification on what the mayor said. The compensation is 10% for gross sales, and the $500 or 1% is for any property marketed but not sold by the contractor. So just
wait a minute, you get $500 if it doesn't sell?
She'll have a minimum fee according to this contract I'm reading. Michelle, you can clarify this. Of $500.
Yes, that is correct.
Market value, whatever fee is greater for any property marketed by the broker but not sold. If she does,
is there a time limit on that, or that need to be determined?
There is a time limit that's put in there. It's basically within 60 days of the bid opening or auction date.
And 1% or 500, whichever is greater or whichever is lesser.
Whichever is greater. And
so
that is to cover
$1 million property and it doesn't sell in 60 days, total failure on the contract side, we lose how much?
It would be 1% of that.
1% of you talking about $1 million?
Yeah.
It'd be the greater for $500 or 1%, and that could be 1%.
I don't like that. Why would we agree to that? I don't like that. And that's not the only problem I have with this contract, but that seems major.
Mr. Chair, I'm trying to get in here.
I'm sorry.
Instead of
One second. All right, Commissioner Wynn, go ahead, and then I've got something to say too.
Instead of just jumping in, I'm asking for permission to talk. Back to just two short questions to Dr. Moffitt. This contract was done in the appropriate manner through an RFP, is that correct? And secondly, is this contract with Ms. Folsom there's no end date on it? There's no contract date, like a year, 2 years, 5 years? Is it extended forever, or can we?
No, I'll answer that question.
Thank you. And then back to the RFP too, I want to know how that was done. Sounds like it was done.
I'm sorry. I'll answer the second question first, which is the termination. The term, if you keep renewing it or don't non-renew it, it goes to June 30th, 2023. But it's also got a 30-day termination provision with or without cause in it. So it's a 30-day contract effect.
Okay, and a 2-year until it's renewed again, or something like that. 3 years.
3 years.
If you don't non-renew it, it goes on. But again, you can terminate it. Either party can terminate it with 30 days notice.
Got it. Okay.
And I'll defer to Dr. Moffitt on the RFP process.
Yes, ma'am. It was done through the normal RFP process.
And if I could add, we do have the numbers for how many people received notification on the registry for this one. It went out to 587 potential vendors. Of those, 172 were African American, 27 were Asian, 5 Native American, 16 Hispanic or Latino, and the remainers were non-minority. So it did receive attention, or at least notice was sent to a fair amount of people, fair number of people.
And only 2 responded.
Right, correct.
So just going back to some of Commissioner Watkins' concern, one of the things is that this is just another tool that we want to use in trying to be proactive. And again, the first part of this project is my intention after we get through the budget is to sit down with Ms. Folsom and look at those properties that we know we own that we don't have a use for. Those are those small, irregular shaped pieces that we just own, that maybe she can go to the neighbor of that property and say, hey, are you interested in purchasing? Her job is to go out and actively market what we would deem surplus property. And again, you would have to approve that list of surplus property. So again, we're just putting this together, and again, I just want to use this as another tool in the toolbox to try to increase some revenue and get rid of some of this property that we have on the books that we're never gonna do anything with.
I'm all for that.
I'm all for the process, Keith, and using the tool. I don't have any problem with the commission. It sounded like that if the $500, Duke, you correct me if I'm wrong, sound like that only comes into play if it involves an auction property, and then it didn't sell because she had done a lot of work as far as setting up the auction, advertising the auction, et cetera. Is that correct?
Michelle, can you elaborate on when the fee kicks in for the minimum?
Right, the fee would kick in if she's actually done work to actively market the property. And that, if you look in the term, it says here, if no bids are received, all bids are rejected, or Macon-Bibb Commission fails to approve a sale within 60 days of the bid opening or auction date. That's when the minimum payment would come into effect.
So it applies only to an auction property where you're paid for marketing expenses. Because see, typically in real estate, this is the only expertise I have in this world. Typically in real estate, we're a performance industry. So we get a commission if we have a closing. So it sounds, if in fact it's only about relates to auctions, then I understand that.
Well, it also applies to just, she's going to have other tools to sell the property, like listing it on her website, advertising it. If she's gone through the process of doing those things, those steps where she's actively marketing a particular piece of property. But remember that the commission always has to approve a sale. So if bids are rejected, if no bids are received, if those factors come into play, then the minimum compensation would also be involved.
Which is the $500.
Or the 1%.
What is it, 5% or 1%, whichever is greater or less? Which is it?
Greater.
Whichever is greater.
$500 or 1%, whichever is greater.
All right. So here again, you're not being clear in that. So is that for a 1-year listing period? Okay. We never got any bids, and I've spent all this marketing dollars. So you're gonna reimburse me for the said marketing dollars because it didn't sell within a 12-month period, or what is it? I think that's
the period that was anticipated was 60 days. If it sat there for 60 days.
okay. I think that's a little lenient. Although at the same time, I would tell you that you're fortunate to find a commercial realtor that would even take on some of these properties because they're not very desirable in most cases. Go ahead, Michael.
I just want to remind for either process, the auction process or the sealed bid process, this is going to work somewhat like an RFP does for purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
So if we identify a property and we say we're going to sell it by sealed bids, then basically it'll just be like publishing an RFP, inviting people to submit their proposals to buy the property, except it's just a quote for the price they want to pay for the property. So she'll market it online for 90 days, 60 days, 30 days, however long it is, depending on the property. But there'll be in that notice, that solicitation for bids, there'll be a firm, you have to get your bid in by X date and time in order for it to be considered.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be the deadline when we know, have we gotten any bids? We don't get any bids. We know what the bids are. And then we can come to the commission and say, hey, we marketed this parcel of property. It was deemed surplus by the administration and the departments. And the high bid that we got was, $100,000 or whatever. Does the commission approve the resolution to sell that and accept the bid or not? So every marketing, a normal commercial real estate listing or any real estate listing, you just kind of put it out on the market and you wait for, until you get a buyer. There's no end date. But with the auctions and the sealed bids, everything that we list is going to have an end date when the bids will be due by or when the auction will be held. So it works a little bit differently in timing as well.
Mr. Chairman, question.
Well, let me make this comment, then I'll come to you, sir. one comment there, Michael. So, typically a contract, as you know, a contract has a beginning and it has an end. So when you say it doesn't have an end date, that confuses me. And you need to allow enough market time. So what days on the market would be, and we certainly don't know what average days on the market would be for some of these buildings that are mostly undesirable. So that's what I'm trying to get at is 90 days, or I think I hear you saying 60 days. Is that enough time to determine, yes, this is saleable or not saleable? Is that enough market time, days on the market? That's
I
my
believe the
question.
contract defers to Ms. Folsom to make that determination. How long does it need to be marketed for?
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. This question is for Mr. Attorney. Either one can answer it if they know. Number one, I thought we already had this type of agreement with the Urban Development Authority. Number two, how is this different from the tax commissioner that is already, marketing properties for us already? And maybe the difference, is it commercial versus residential? I'm just trying to say number one and two. How is it different? And my understanding, we had this already agreed upon with the Urban Development Authority. Thank you.
My opinion would be, it would be, as Keith has said, just another tool in the toolbox, because we still have a lot of surplus property, and I think Stephanie Folsom, or an excellent commercial realtor like her, could be very valuable to us, because we're not moving those properties. So we need additional help in dispersing or moving those properties. That would be my opinion.
Well, that's correct. This is Duke. It's another way of disposing of surplus property. The tax commissioner can and is doing tax foreclosure sales related to properties that have tax liens on them. People don't pay their ad valorem taxes. The Urban Development Authority can dispose of property in certain ways consistent with urban development. This is just another. This may be a property that doesn't fit any of those categories that the county wants to dispose of because it's just sitting there. And again, it's not exclusive. The county manager, contemplated in the contract, will give a list of property that would be subject to being disposed of. So it doesn't necessarily have, it doesn't necessarily cross over into the lines that you described with the tax commissioner and the Urban Development Authority. It could be just totally separate.
As a follow-up, let me
Go
follow
ahead.
up, Mr. Commissioner.
Go ahead.
So then why not, because we know a lot of folks want to do business with the government, why not let it be a free-for-all for any, why put a bid out? Why not just allow realtors to come and get a list of our properties, and if they can get a sale, just take care of whomever sells the property? Why did we send it out for a bid or have to be exclusive? Because there's a lot of people are listening, and I know our process. I just thought maybe would it, is there some reason why we just didn't say any realtor, Macon-Bibb has all these properties, help us move them. You may have connections that we don't have, and just let it be, a free for all for any realtor. Why did we just do it exclusive and go through a bid process? Thank you.
I can answer that for you. You'll come out better if you have a quote listing agent, because that agent's going to focus on those properties and has a vested interest in moving them. I would think in this arrangement, if and it sounds almost like what we call a pocket listing, Duke, in that she has this list of inventory, but it does not prohibit someone else from coming forward and say, I've got a buyer for building A over here. I've got a buyer, and I'm going to submit this offer to purchase and sale agreement to Stephanie Folsom, who would be I don't know where the background's coming from. I'm going to submit this to Stephanie Folsom, who will be our quote listing agent. And at that point in time, you would have a purchase and sale. One would be a listing broker, one would be a selling broker. And my question would be, typically in real estate, not required, but typically the seller pays the commission. So of course that would be us on our properties, and the buyer doesn't typically pay a commission. So anyway, it sounds to me like that's the arrangement. She's given a list of properties, and she has the right to go out and market and sell these properties, and she's got different benefits for doing both. Of course, the ultimate payoff is when she sells or closes on the property, and that's when she makes a commission. You could have another realtor involved, I would think.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I would say that's correct. And to Mayor Pro Tem, I would say that yes, we still would have this arrangement where we could transfer property to the Urban Development Authority.
Yep.
This doesn't lock us into just one way of disposing of property. So we could transfer it to the Urban Development Authority. But for those properties on a list that we declare surplus, then Stephanie, as our agent, would go through all these steps to create a website, to create the same kinds of things that the tax commissioner did, and market them. Another tool in the toolbox.
Yes, sir. I agree. We need the additional help from somebody like Stephanie, and many of these properties are going to be extremely hard to sell, and she will have earned her commission. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Bivens.
Sounds like we need to put this on hold until we can do a review. There are a lot of questions and seems to be misunderstandings about it.
Well, my questions have been answered. Does anybody else have any questions?
I guess, yeah, I'm still more than a little concerned. I see the advantage of it, but I guess process-wise, I don't know how the city, if I'm correct, most of these surpluses are what we're talking about are currently maintained by the Land Bank Authority. Am I?
No,
not necessarily. The Land Bank Authority has been reticent to accept because of the maintenance involved. So they've been reticent to accept for disposition property for which there is no immediate purpose. And I think maybe Commissioner Bivens can confirm that for us. So we don't have an outlet through the Land Bank Authority for just blighted properties that we end up holding title to.
I think that's true. The Land Bank helps facilitate sales. A lot of that facilitation happens because of its ability to forgive taxes. But if properties that had not been dealt with will turn over to the Land Bank doesn't have the funding to pay people to keep all that property up.
So surplus property that the county owns now that's not maintained by the Land Bank Authority is maintenance by whom?
A lot of times it doesn't get maintained. That's why we have so much blighted property out there when, with trees and bushes in yards.
Right.
And that's true too, but we've got nobody trying to market that property, actively market it.
Exactly. Well, if there are no further comments and questions, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Commissioner Bivens opposed. It passes 4-1. I think it'll be a good tool, and I think she'll do a good job. It'll be a hard task. That's all we have for facilities and engineering. So we are hereby adjourned. Anybody need to make a comfort break? Mayor, do you want to make that announcement or?
Well, no, I mean, what I'd like to do is to see if we couldn't go to the next committee, which is Public Safety Committee. It's got one item on the agenda.
Right.
So
I think we can make this quick, okay, guys? Just hold on, we can make this quick.
Chairman Wynn, why don't you roll on?
Yes, thank you, sir. I'll call the Public Safety Committee to order. We have with us myself, the chair, and we have Vice Chair Jones and Commissioners Allen, Scotty Shepherd, and Virgil Watkins. We're a full house, guy. Good deck to deal with, okay? So we just got a couple of items here. First of all, the minutes from February 25th, 2020. Do I have I entertain a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any deletions, additions, or corrections to the minutes? If none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? The minutes are approved. All right, the next item of business is basically, if you'll put that up, whoever does that, Rachel. Thank you. It's we are going to have to put out some upgraded stainless steel kennels at our Macon-Bibb County Animal Shelter. Let me just give a little background, or maybe one of the attorneys wants to do this, but we entered into a consent order with the Department of Agriculture, who came in and inspected our animal shelter back in October of 2019 and found some purported issues out there. And one of the issues was we had to upgrade the kennels out there. And this money is being used, and it comes from the SPLOST money for animal control. So it's not coming out of the general fund, but it's something we have to do to comply with the consent order that we entered into with the Department of Agriculture. And this is one of the many things we need to do. But if we do this, we're complying with that consent order and we're avoiding a fine down the road. So do we need any further explanation of that right now? Or the attorney?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All right, any further discussion on that? All right, all those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
All those against, state the same. The motion has been approved. See, guys, I told you it was going to be short and sweet. And just remember, public safety is not just a committee thing. It's something every day for you folks out there to stay safe as we move through this pandemic. And I thank you. And this is all the business on our committee today. So the committee, excuse me, we're through.
Amen.
We're done.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Wynn. I appreciate you being so expeditious in handling the affairs of the committee.
Well, I need a comfort break too, so that's why we need to be expeditious.
Well, and so let me do this. Let me call to order the committee of the whole and tell you what's on the agenda, so you'll have a little bit better idea. And after we get through with committee of the whole, operations and finance will convene, and operations and finance has a couple of items that they need to get to, actually one, I guess, before they go into there to talk about the budget. So I don't know how long Chairman Watkins is going to want to work on that. But as for the committee of the whole, we've got on our agenda approval of the minutes, and then there are two companion ordinances for a proposed reduction in force for the contemplated furlough of recreation for a period of approximately 90 days, and then a year-long furlough of a half a day per week or 1 day of pay period is contemplated. So there'll be some discussion about giving the mayor the authority to do that, because we need to improve the Reduction in Force Act. We then want to broach the conversation about repealing the ordinance that Chairman Watkins sponsored to create a 2% increase and it's a new pay scale. It was to be effective on July the 1st, and we admitted when we had the last budget meeting that we had not taken that into consideration in formulation of the budget. So what we're asking is to kind of repeal that so it doesn't go into effect on July the 1st, and instead we substitute a new pay scale that's in the final process of being presented to us by the consultant. So then we've got a loan contemplation to the Macon Housing Authority for a low-income housing plan that they're trying to put in down at the intersection of 7th Street and Walnut, and this is to loan them $375,000 out of a revolving loan fund that we have for that purpose through Economic and Community Development Department. So those are the items on the list, and I'm hopeful that we can have a rather short meeting and allow Chairman Watkins to convene his operations and finance in 45 minutes to an hour. So now what's the thought about taking a comfort break for 5 minutes now and recessing for 5 minutes and then coming back, or plow straight ahead?
Whichever one you choose. I was planning on doing a lunch break prior to our budget stuff starting. We've been here for a while. Okay.
Then my thought would be if you feel the need to take a comfort break, that you do so wherever you are and do it one at a time as you need to, but that we go ahead and move forward with the committee of the whole and the agenda as I just presented it. Is there any strenuous objection to doing it that way? Hearing no strenuous objection, then let's go ahead and take the first item, which is approval of the minutes of our May the 12th committee of the whole meeting, which have been prepared and distributed to you.
So moved.
Got Schlesinger. Gonna get a second?
Second.
By Wynn. All in favor of approval of the minutes, then signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The minutes are approved. Okay, the second item is a A and a B part, and I'm gonna ask the attorneys to kind of walk us through kind of what they did, and Dr. Moffitt as well, with the proposed reduction in force bills. Dr. Moffitt, do you want to lead us off, or you want to turn it over to the attorneys, or what?
Well, I can definitely lead it off. As you know, when we presented the budget this year, we did talk about the possibility of including furloughs in the budget, the final budget. With that, the policy currently is tied all into one policy, the reduction in force policy. So what I would like to do is ask for the attorneys to explain to you the proposed change to the ordinance, which will specifically deal with furloughs if and when we need to do this in the future. To give you an example, the reduction in force is pretty much a almost like a termination or a permanent layoff, where we anticipate that a furlough will have a time period on it and some certain stipulations as to how we would implement the furlough and what approval levels would go along with that. So with that, with Michael or Duke, well, Michael, since you drafted, could you explain the highlights of this policy? You're muted, Michael.
Sorry, I'd be glad to go over these. I do want to know and apologize if this is my mistake, but the versions of these ordinances that are appearing on the board docs are missing an amendment that I made on Friday to these. And so I just want to include that in the discussion. But the first item is regards general employees. And so this is an authorization for the mayor and the administration to furlough those employees that are identified in the exhibit based on the needs of the county, the operational and financial needs of the county, for a period of time not to exceed 8 hours per pay period, to begin no earlier than when the ordinance takes effect and end no later than June 30th of 2021. And so the group of employees that this impacts would be all Bibb County Sheriff's Office employees except for sworn deputies, all fire department employees except for sworn firefighters, all other employees that Macon-Bibb County manages or processes payroll for, including employees of constitutional or elected officials, except for those employees who we do not have the legal authority to reduce their salaries for, and those employees working in E911 or emergency management departments. And so this is, because this is written as a grant of authority, first of all, I want to note that this does not require the mayor or administration to use the full extent of the furlough power. If there's a department that has a particular need, for example, they're working on some project and they really need the manpower to do some sort of final push 1 week, the mayor and administration would have the authority to waive the furlough requirements on a department by department or week by week basis. Also, depending on volatility in the market. If revenues come in higher than expected and the financial need isn't as strong, then they have the authority to terminate this at any time. It doesn't necessarily have to carry all the way through the end of June. But the provision that's not on board docs also adds, as part of the implementation of this policy, employees shall not be permitted to take annual leave or other paid leave during hours in which the employee is furloughed. If an employee is furloughed for only part of a workday, that employee may take annual or other paid leave for those hours where the employee is scheduled to work in accordance with applicable leave policies. And so the purpose of that is so if you're furloughed for a period of time, then if the entire county takes annual leave in lieu of going on furlough, then there's no cost savings achieved. But by taking that option away and just clarifying that that's the case, then that'll ensure that to the extent we have to use a furlough, that'll achieve the desired effect. Up there, I can go on to the recreation ordinance if you'd like.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, sorry. So the one for the recreation department, basically it sets out the same parameters, except for it allows for the employees in recreation department to be furloughed for a period of time not to exceed 64 hours per pay period. So that's a max of 8 out of the 10 days per pay period. And to begin no earlier than the effective date of this ordinance and no later than August 31st, 2020. This is much shorter in duration. This will be at most June, July, and August, 3 months. The same provisions about not allowing employees to take paid leave during the furlough time is in here. And then in the exhibit, it's got a list by title of the employees that would be eligible for furlough. And my understanding is there's 71 or 72 employees in the rec department, and this list by title 5 of those employees. And my understanding is this is essentially the people that work in the various recreation centers that will not be operating for the summer. And so this takes them down to 1 day to a minimum of 1 day per week, 2 days per pay period. Again, this is a grant of authority, so the mayor and administration, as needed, would have the authority to go less than that. They don't have to go to the full reduction. But, you know, for example, if towards the end of August, they want to spin things up to get ready for the fall programs, they can do that before the end of August. So that's the way the recreation ordinance works.
And some may inquire why this is part of the budget. And my response to that is that we're trying to contemplate, especially as to recreation employees, June, July, and August. So you got 1 month in this fiscal year and 2 months in next fiscal year. So the budget doesn't take effect until next fiscal year. So what we're trying to do is to take advantage of the situation and use June and the savings that we get in this year's budget by making these cuts would then create an additional fund balance on which we could draw next year. So we're trying to do that. So this could be effective as early as next week when you say final approval, because that's when it's effective. So we could furlough then for June. We could also consider furloughing all of the other employees like we were talking about for half a day a week or 1 day per pay period. We could implement that earlier than July the 1st and save some additional funds that way. Questions, comments, or thoughts?
I like to make a comment.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor. I don't think any of us like doing any of the things that you just mentioned. I don't see a choice that we can take that's going to help us to get to a state requirement. I think that's what's driving this whole thing. The state requires us to have a balanced budget when it gets passed. And the amount of money that's been lost, I think you pointed out last time, is substantial enough that there's no way to make it up.
That's correct, Commissioner Bivens. So, Commissioner Wynn, did you have something you wanted?
Yes, sir, I do. How does this affect our pension employees, these furlough days?
We talked about that, and basically my thought is it really doesn't affect them at all from a pension standpoint, because when you calculate your individual pension amount, you take your 3 highest years of salary. So this would factor into that, but your highest years, you may have had some of your highest years, or your highest years may be ahead of you, but you get your 3 highest years. So I don't think there would be any significant impact on calculation of pensions for individuals. The second thing is that the collective benefit to the pension plan, we always go through this actuarial analysis every year, and we have to make an annual required contribution to keep the pension fund not only solvent, but to where it'll pay out all of the benefits that is actuarially sound, I think is what the term that they use. So I don't think it's going to adversely impact anybody's pension.
Well, I mean, is there a difference between county pensions and city pensions for employees? I was told there would be some effect by someone in the know within the city on the pensions.
I don't think there would be.
Yes, they would.
I've been told differently.
Any other questions, comments, or thoughts?
Yes.
Commissioner Watkins?
I haven't been adequately convinced that the consequences or the benefits of not providing any summer resources or alternatives for our youth is a good thing. And when I think about our budget impacts, right now your budget is balanced based off of a $10 million fund balance, $10 million coming from our savings from fund balance to balance the entire budget. If I'm understanding correctly, the cuts that you're proposing, these 73 employees, some of us which have worked for more than 20 years from us, is about $600,000 worth of savings. And like I say, I'm not sure if the cost benefit there when we talk about the impacts to public safety, crime, and everything else and just the enrichment of our youth, I have a concern with. And I'm also bothered by the fact that this is our 3rd budget year because of some type of, I know one year it was, I can't even remember the reason, but this is our 3rd year where we're taking out our budget on our recreation department, where you propose to defund or completely defund or remove a recreation department. And I just don't go along with that, sir.
Well,
nobody likes it. I acknowledge that, Commissioner Watkins. But the situation that I think we're facing, as Commissioner Bivens said, really doesn't leave us much of an alternative. So if you've got to balance the budget, you got to figure out a way to do it. 80% of our budget is personnel, and it's mighty hard to figure out how to get the savings we need out of the other 20%. Commissioner Wynn, I see you trying to get my.
I think we haven't gone into the deep process of looking at the expenses and the things budgeted out there. So there's some other places I think some money can be cut that won't affect employees. And I'm kind of the same feeling that we always seem to pick on the rec department, but you know, in some months they aren't as active as other months. I realize that, but the summer months are when they're most active. It would seem like, of course, we've had a slowdown there too because of the virus, but I really hate that we always seem to pick on them. When we look at cutting things, especially to I call them non-governmental agencies, we know the pain needs to be felt all the way down. If we have to cut or furlough our employees, then they have to do it too. We have to cut them and they have to do the same thing. I mean, we're all in this together. So I just think we need to look a little further before we say we're going to furlough anybody right this moment. That's just my opinion. I know nobody wants to do that, but.
Right. Well, the further discussion,
Motion to table.
comments,
Motion to table.
Second,
motion
both of
and
them.
motion and second to table both been non-debatable. So all of those, I really need a roll call because it's going to be hard for me to try to figure out. Let Janice call the roll then, and this will be the motion to table both 2A and 2B.
Commissioner Tillman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Bibbins, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen, how do you vote?
Table both.
Commissioner Lucas has left the meeting. Commissioner Schlesinger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones, how do you vote?
No.
Commissioner Shepard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Watkins, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn, how do you vote?
Yes.
A vote of 7-1.
The ayes have it. These two items are tabled, but let me go back and say one other thing. They'll appear on the agenda next time, simply because I think we all contemplate getting additional information and perhaps using them. So rather than indefinitely disappearing from agendas, they'll be back on committee of the whole for our next meeting. So that takes us into the number. Question?
I said that's because that's how tabling works.
It did today.
Well, I mean, yeah, that it. My understanding of a motion to table is that it's not defeated. If you move and second to disapprove, and that's all, that's done. That's been disapproved. But where you table it for more information, get us more information about this, get us more information about that. It's not defeated, nor is it approved, but it comes back up for additional consideration. So that's all I'm saying. That we'll have it there, bring it up for additional consideration. We haven't defeated this. We hadn't. So it's still there, but that's just procedural, and we'll take it up in more detail as we need to. Next item that we're trying to get to is number 3, which is the repeal of Commissioner Watkins' 2% increase, and let's see if Dr. Moffitt can explain how this ended up costing us money, even though all it did was to put in a 2% bracket. We've got to assign everybody to the new pay scale. And even though it's only pennies or nickels or dimes of difference in a salary to get them to the new pay scale that's not less than what they're currently making, ends up with a price tag, I've been told, of somewhere between $100,000 and $300,000 estimated, because we hadn't done the math yet. And we acknowledged and admitted we have not taken that into consideration in this year's budget. We were told, "Whoops, did you take this into consideration?" And our answer was, "No, we really haven't." So if you say, "Well, we're going to enact that pay scale effective July," then I don't know what it does for the new pay scale that we're trying to put in place at whatever point. But we hadn't appropriated the money or found the money or put it in the budget, included it in the budget to enact this on July the 1st. So with that having been said, this is an ordinance to repeal the 2%. And now questions, comments, thoughts?
Yes.
That is. Yes. Well, see, just the background on this. Commission, you adopted this policy prior to your approval of the company to pay scale.
The what now?
You adopted this policy prior to you approving to hire the company to do the pay. And it was my understanding that the company doing the pay scale would do the pay scale, put in the new pay scale, and we will move forward from there. Michael reminded us that because you adopted this, that it is in place. Now, 2 things happen with that. And the best way to explain it is to try to use simple math. And what I was trying to say the other day is some of us were under the impression that the 2% pay scale only added a step in between the current pay scale, which are on steps of 4%. So it goes like 0, 4, 8. And we were thinking that only thing that your pay scale did, Commissioner, was added 0, 2, 4, 6, and 8. That is not the case. Your pay scale, the numbers are cumulative, and that they really make additional to where they're not exactly, as I just said, the whole number 2, 4, 6, and 8. That is 450 and things like that. So it does cause. Alicia showed me after the meeting last week that based on her review, it does show where some of the numbers are higher, that if we were to put people on the pay scale now, it would change some of the current salaries, which would throw off the current pay scale study that we've already given the information to the company. So what I would like to do is, again, ask you, repeal your 2%, let us continue on with this pay scale. The information, we have the first draft, it came in Friday about 4 o'clock. So we're to schedule to talk to them today to, as we review it, and now we're trying to make the tweak. We have to take that information along with the Healthcare Advisory Committee, because we've committed to include them in this process and continue on with the next steps of this process. So again, the pay scale that you adopted, I don't want to say is not as simple as what I was led to believe in that. And Alicia has shown me that the numbers, and we don't really know where those numbers came from, because had you just done a simple 2% in each step, then my thinking was that it really would be 2, 4, 6, 8, and not a cumulative pay scale.
And just to follow up, when it was passing, I knew that it was going to have an additional cost. This isn't our first pay scale. The first one we implemented that people are on now, the same thing was true. Because of the cumulative nature of it, the numbers aren't exactly clean. And when it was presented, that was a fact. And I am trying so hard to provide you guys with the framework in order to pay your employees. You make it so difficult. Every time there is a problem that relates to service delivery, your answer is there's a vacancy, we can't afford to pay it, we're below the market rate, particularly when it comes to the sheriff's department, which public safety is so important to all of us based on what we say. We know that we're like $5,000, $10,000 over. No matter what type of proposal is put on this board to try to pay your people, you, the mayor, and the staff always come up with the reason not to do it. And right now you're offering a repeal with no replace. Like you don't even have the pay scale that you're offering ready yet, and you already want to repeal something. You understand why this test is my faith, right?
Right, but the test of that is, I've always said we need to do something comprehensive. To pick out one department, the minute we do that, the other departments are wondering where theirs is. So that's why we went through this process of identifying a company to help us do a comprehensive pay scale that we can do all the salaries. Remember that's what we said from the beginning. That's what I've always stressed. Picking out one department, and yes, I agree, public safety is a priority department, but I have other departments that are saying the same thing. Public safety, we did a pay adjustment right before I got here. I got here 2 years ago, so I've led to believe that they did a pay scale adjustment for public safety 3 years ago, and nothing was done for the general departments.
So today you have a proposal that will put $300,000 at maximum, $300,000 extra in your employee's pocket. And you're rather than try to figure that out, your initial response is let's repeal it without a replacement.
The replacement is coming. We've told you, we are committed to to the draft that's coming back with the pay scale study that you paid a company to go out, do the market analysis. We're going through the information now. We're trying to, as I said, we are committed to implementing it on January 1. So we said that from the beginning. We've never waited.
Same time would be fair though. If you had one document that we need to repeal this to replace it with the new document, that would be a trustworthy exchange. Right now I'm having issues. And none of these are funded. So if you have a pay scale that's in the wings, you haven't placed funding for it, and it's more than the $300,000 that's here today. So
Well, the only thing that I can add, my thought is that if you repeal this new pay scale, that would leave you with the old one in place. So you wouldn't have nothing. You'd go back to the old one, but rather than add these new 2% steps, so everybody would stay where they are currently on the existing pay scale, and you wouldn't adopt a new interim pay scale. The second part of that is what's already been said, and that is it would throw off the figures that we've submitted to the consultant to help us come up with a new plan. I saw Commissioner Allen. He had a comment. I think he was waving his hand in front of the screen. No? Yes?
No, I'm gonna let y'all just fight this out. I mean, if it was me, I'd give it back to the commissioner and finance and let them go in and see if they couldn't work it out in the next couple of days. Because I think we're running too fast. I think we need to slow down. We're talking about furloughing people, certain people. We're talking about now on our ordinance. We've only been in this pandemic for 2 months or 2.5 months. We need to slow down and everybody get on the same page.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Any other questions, comments, or thoughts?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Allen on this. It seems to me that, nobody has to tell me, but I know that you guys have all probably been trying to work this out behind the scene and to come on here and just put it on committee of the whole and just, I guess, force us to do what y'all can't work out behind the scene. Y'all have until June 9th. So keep working and working it out. And, let's move on to something else.
Well, the only thing I'll say, and I appreciate that advice, but the only thing I'll say in response is that we know that unemployment benefits for the recreation employees, we know that the time that is June, July, and August. That's when we think there's going to be the lowest demand for recreational services. So if you postponed it now, so the soonest it could come back to the committee of the whole would be 2 weeks from now. Well, this is the end of May, so you're already halfway into June by the time you get it back. And right, so you've lost those 2 weeks, and these are 2 of the weeks where they would be entitled not just to unemployment benefits from the state, but also this federal COVID unemployment benefit that's going to expire at July the 31st, is my understanding. So the longer you postpone and delay and defer, the more problems you're creating for yourself down the road. But that's just my opinion. What other questions, comments, or thoughts?
Well, let me follow up, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm interested in whatever comes out of the finance committee, because normally they would just recommend to us, and usually that committee would do the work and make a true recommendation. I think that committee needs to have the administration's input and then make the recommendation. And we can have a special call meeting within 24 hours to get this done prior to the next 2 weeks. So I'll reach out to Commissioner Watkins as well and Dr. Moffitt, but it just seems like it needs to be worked out behind the scenes, in my opinion.
All right, that leaves us back where we are. Questions, comments. So can I get a motion? Is there a motion?
You got Mallory Jones.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, I can't. He's not up on my screen. But Commissioner Jones, go ahead.
Yes, sir. For what it's worth, it's already been stated by Commissioner Bibbins. None of us want to furlough or take any measures like this, but I really think, for the most part, your budget was right on target, and I think this furlough with a half day each pay period is a very fair way to do it. None of us like it, but I think it's a fair way to do it, and we don't really have any choice. And so I know it's been tabled, and we're going to vote on that later on next time. But the other things, you know, I think overall the budget, you know, as far as the pay increase, I think if we do a little, I think we're going to cause confusion if we do a two-step. We do a 2% now, and then we're waiting on the results for the pay study, which we need to do, and we're all committed to doing. I think we're better off to just do it one time. You'll have less complaints, less confusion, and ultimately everybody will be better off for it. Thank you.
Just one question, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Jones just mentioned a half a day per pay period, but is it a half a day a week and 1 day per pay period? 2 days?
Correct.
Correct?
That's what was proposed. Right.
1 half day per week, 1 full day per pay
Right.
period.
Correct.
I misspoke. You're correct.
And secondly, I agree with Commissioner Jones. We don't need to do this two-step thing. We've committed to the pay scale study for the second time, I might add. It's deja vu all over again. We need to see what that brings about, and we need to stay there and work with that, not some 2% going right now. It's going to mess up everything.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Jones, a second by Wynn. Further discussion? This would be to approve the ordinance which would repeal the 2% pay scale that would have otherwise been effective July 1st.
Mr.
Other
Mayor.
questions, comments, or thoughts? Michael?
Yes, sir. I just want to clarify the legal effect of the resolution that's on the table, or that's before the board right now. So ordinance 019-0066 that was approved last fall had 3 sections in it. Section 1 is the section that implemented this 2% step pay scale. And so this ordinance that's before the board right now is to repeal that section. Sections 2 and 3, you may recall there was some discussion about including a policy for an automatic step increase as a cost of living measure for each year. And that was changed in the policies and procedures manual. But as I believe it was Christy Alucci pointed out, if we put it in as an automatic increase, and that affects our actuarial calculations for the pension. So it was put in as a permissive increase, and there's no reference to it being a 2% or 4% step change at all. And so this ordinance that's before the commission right now leaves intact that ambitional language that was added to the personnel policy and procedure manual to allow the commission discretion as part of the budget process to consider on an annual basis whether the financial conditions support doing a cost of living increase on a non-merit basis, and that leaves all of that intact. And as I believe you mentioned earlier, Mr. Mayor, repealer would put into effect the existing pay scale that is currently used right now, that is set to expire June 30th. It would just perpetuate that beyond the June 30th expiration date if this is approved. So I just want to clarify that for everybody, so you know.
And that's very helpful, Michael. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
So this is the repeal of section 1 of ordinance 0-19-0066.
Follow-up question.
Follow-up question, Commissioner Watkins.
So if this is repealed, what is the administration's plan on the replacement legislation, timeline-wise?
To be perfectly honest, what we are contemplating was to implement the new pay scale on January the 1st. That is timeline-wise. But that's just my thought at this point, and certainly it's up to the commission to try to implement it sooner or later.
What is my ability, or when will I actually have documentation to make that decision? Right now, we don't have any.
Correct, and we're in the process. Dr. Moffitt just said the consultant sent us a very rough draft, is my understanding of what they sent, with some questions, some follow-up questions that we're supposed to get back with them later today, is what I understood. And as soon as we get something to show to the commission, believe me, we'll bring it forward. And we'll start with the budget and operations and finance committee, because that's where it's got to go.
All right, just to close that out. So should I be expecting to see something within the week, or?
Dr. Moffitt, I'm gonna turn it over to you. I would assume so, but maybe I'm misspeaking. Dr. Moffitt?
Yes, I have a very preliminary rough draft of something I could show you right now, but it is.
I mean, does that provide a number and some guide as to where we're going, or is it just narrative? I mean,
Yeah, yes and no. What they told me, and I hadn't seen it, but what they told me, it had something like a light, medium, and full, and it ranged from something like $2 million addition to $6 million addition. How close is that, Dr. Moffitt?
But you're right. It was 3 to 8.
3 to 8.
They gave a
So,
minimum number. And they gave a maximum number.
Right. So.
And that was 3 to 8 for the annual or for 6 months?
For the annual.
Okay.
So yeah, we got some decisions to make down the road as to the new pay scale and getting it in place and when it'll be effective. But right now, we would, I think even the budget committee would appreciate repealing section 1 of this ordinance that puts a different pay scale in place July the 1st.
Was that in the budget projection that we're?
No, sir. No, sir, it was not, Commissioner Schlesinger. That's what I acknowledged earlier. So we'd have to find some additional money to do that too, plus the manpower necessary to do all the calculations. Got a motion and second. Is there further discussion?
I wasn't finished, Mr.
Oh,
Mayor.
go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I did have a conversation with Dr. Moffitt last week, is that it's going to cost $4 million to implement the new pay scale. If I remember what Dr. Moffitt told me, he said we were going to do half as of January the 1st, and then I'm not sure where the other half, comes in. But the thing that really disturbed me, I asked him whether there's money in the budget for implementing a new pay scale. He said no, and that the only source of funding for, let's say it's $2 million, if we're only going to do half, is going to be the reserves. So, we're talking about taking $10 million from the reserves just to balance what is really a deficit budget that we're looking at. And if we take another $2 million out or $4 million out, we're starting to go through it again. And I think we've really got to, put the brakes on before we're down to 5 million or worse again. I just can't see rifling through the reserve funding for everything, basically. So that's my 2 cents in here.
Right. And those are excellent points for the budget discussion. What we're talking about right now, what the motion second is to repeal the ordinance that implements a separate or new pay scale effective July the 1st with a 2% increment in it that doesn't necessarily move anybody up by 2%, but to put them on the pay scale, pennies or fractions of nickels, dimes in hourly pay for people to do all that. Then to try to substitute it again. So the motion and second is to repeal section 1 of the previous ordinance that we passed that had the 2% steps added to the pay scale. Further discussion on that item? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to repeal section 1 of that ordinance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Got 1 no, Alan. So the ayes have it, and
no 2.
2. Okay, we got 2 then. So there are 8 voting members. So it's 6-2. So the ayes have it. Thank you very much. That takes us to item 4, which is an application for a loan commitment out of our revolving loan fund down at Economic and Community Development to help facilitate the Macon Housing Authority's application for low-income housing tax credits. Dr. Moffitt, are you going to talk about that, or am I?
I'm
Want me to take a stab at it and you correct it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Everybody I think will remember and recall the Mother's Day tornado that resulted in a grant from the state of money for disaster recovery loans, $750,000 to the city of Macon and $750,000 to the county. That $1.5 million was initially pledged to a project in the Atlantic cotton mills to convert the old Atlantic cotton mills to loft apartments. Before they could get that closed, it caught on fire, burned to the ground. So the money sat there for another little while before the Dannenberg loft. People made application to use it. The entire 1.5 was paid to Dannenberg. That project went and has been very successful. The money was paid back and put into quote unquote a revolving loan fund. The Macon Housing Authority, it initially came in and asked for a loan that the commission approved for, I think, $1 million. And that was a couple of years ago to go toward Tyndall Fields and the renovation of Tyndall Fields. And that money will be repaid, but over 20 years. And that leaves you with about $500,000 plus a little bit of interest in this, that, or the other. And now Macon Housing Authority is coming back again and asking for another loan because it helps them get points on their application for low-income housing tax credits. If there's a loan of money from a fund like this, it's a quasi-governmental fund, so they get extra points, and they're looking for extra points so that they can do low-income housing at the intersection of 7th Street and Walnut Street, next door to Daybreak, to put in low-income housing on that location. So that's what they're asking for. This would be a loan, and I cannot tell you right off the top of my head exactly what the terms of the loan are, but it does pay interest, and it's paid back over a period of years, interest and principal, over, I think, a 15-year amortization schedule. Dr. Moffitt, how bad did I mess you up?
I think you got the 30,000 foot view pretty good.
I'm being told, Dr. Moffitt, that Mike Austin is on the call and maybe may be able to correct us both. Mike, you want to step in?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can. Go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, Mayor, you hit all the fine points. We are very excited about this potential property. 82 units of multifamily workforce / affordable housing. We'll roughly spend probably $13 million down there. We have formed a partnership with the Paul USA and Daybreak to build this property, and I think it will be a tremendous asset to the community. The other exciting piece of it, there will be 6 to 8 beds of respite care, which will be included in that particular property. And that allows for people who are homeless to go in and have care given to them. And that takes a little bit of pressure off emergency room visits and so on and so forth. So we're very, very excited about this, and we appreciate your consideration.
Mike, what is the interest rate, if you remember it, and what are the terms of the loan? Is it a 15-year amortization and you start paying back principal and interest?
Yes, sir. It's 15 years at 1.15%. Yes, sir.
Okay, because it's got to be a low interest loan in order to qualify to get points. So 1.15% interest, but it's a pretty good risk. The Macon Housing Authority has an excellent track record. If they don't get the housing tax credits, then they don't go forward, and the loan so it's conditional on them getting the low-income housing tax credits. But this is just our pledge to give them this amount of money to help them get the tax credits. Questions, comments, or thoughts? And if I don't have any, can I get a motion?
So move.
Second.
Got a motion. Got a motion and second. Further discussion.
Well, I'd like to have that 1.15% interest rate. Wow, Mike.
I hear you. Other questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Mike, thank you very much. We are at the end of our agenda for Committee of the Whole. So if there's no further business, I'll adjourn the Committee of the Whole. And Chairman Watkins, I understand your first order of business is to take a lunch break.
I'm gonna defer to Commissioner Bivens. How do you want to proceed with the rest of our day? I got one item. Let's do this one item, then we'll talk about budget. I have a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. First item on our appropriation agenda. Hold on. It was there the whole time. Is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a purchase agreement with Williams Communication in the amount of $53,193.55 for batteries and power supply adapters. This is to be paid from the computer and hardware and IT line. I have a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion, questions? There being none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, this motion carries. That was all of our action for today, but of course we were planning to do budget hearings. Commissioner Lucas is still away, and I know some people, including myself, have gotten a bit lunchy. So I was going to ask Commissioner Bivens, at what point did you want to return today? And also wanted to ask Duke to think about, if we open this meeting up now and don't adjourn but recess on the return.
If you open up the meeting now and recess, say again.
Could I not recess till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning?
Did we? No, we did put the notice in.
So I guess I'm asking, it's a technical thing. So if I adjourn the meeting and start a new meeting, then yes, I need a notice. But this meeting did not close. It just recessed for a time certain. Am I being too?
Yeah, no, I understand that, but under the, you got to give at least 24 hours notice of, yeah. If it's going another day, you're going to have to do 24 hours. You could do it till tomorrow afternoon. We could get the notice out 24 hours.
Okay. So, but needless to say, do y'all want comments? I can go from 1 to 5 today, but that might not be reasonable for others on the call. So I was trying to.
You know, if you want to take a break, that would be fine with me, and just do this for a couple hours or whatever afterwards.
All right, so 2 o'clock, is that?
1:20 now.
2:30, what you need, an hour, 30 minutes? I can't hear.
You're muted, Janice.
I think somebody was saying 2:30 would.
Yeah.
2:30? All right. Oh.
So this is Rachel. We'll need y'all to dial back into the same meeting. You can leave, but it'll be the same meeting ID and code for you to get back into the meeting when you're ready to get back in, and we'll start a new live stream at that point.
Okay.
What time?
2:30. Unless I hear opposition now, we're adjourning for 2:30.
Mm-hmm.
Please have a quorum. All right, we're adjourned.
Just so I know, what information are we discussing? So I make sure I got everybody ready.
Yeah, Ms. Moore has been providing so far, but that staffing review section, I sent an email this morning.
Okay, so the stuff on
staffing review is what I would anticipate. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right.